Let's jump right into it. And Liz Dunn, let me start with you here. What is that spark of innovation that Seattle has? Critics would say Seattle is losing its soul with some of these big projects. How do you respond to that?
Wow, losing its soul.
Oh, and good morning.
Oh,
yeah.
good morning. Good morning. Apologies too. I have a nasty cold, so if I stop making sense, just bear with me. But you know, I don't think Seattle's losing its soul, or I think that there are lots of things we can do to make sure it doesn't. Trying to keep a city's soul is an economic decision as much as a sentimental one. And in my own real estate practice, I try really hard to reuse existing assets, somehow integrate them into my projects, as do our other two panelists this morning. And that's because I think that helps create places that people want to be in, and I think I get more interesting tenants as a result. But we're seeing an enormous amount of new construction, infill development in the city. I also do infill development sometimes, and you know, when I'm talking to other real estate developers, I like to promote the idea that, you know, you're not just building a building, you're making a piece of city. When you're in an urban infill site, you have to think about context and the connective tissue that you are creating between two buildings on a block or between two blocks in a neighborhood. And so every building plays a larger role as well.
Does indeed. Ben, let me draw you in here because some would say we're paving our history every day here in Seattle, but you just decided to blow out the backside of Pike Place Market. A big move here. I just want to ask that question. Are we losing a piece of history in that process of connecting Pike Place to the waterfront?
Great question, Brian. I think in many ways we're completing a vision. I can literally point to the page in the 1973 Urban Renewal Plan that talks about the PC1 North site and what it is to be used for. So it's one of the longest standing urban renewal plans in the nation, and it's at this moment we're finally able to realize that vision. But I have to say, I'm sitting here this morning, I'm listening to Tony, and I'm thinking, holy crap, are we building too much parking?
Yeah, right.
You know, fortunately, you know, the great vision for Seattle's waterfront, if you look in detail at our plans, we've already carving out some of our existing parking in the interim condition when that viaduct comes down to create retail space that fronts the new Overlook Walk, right? That was one of the reasons we undertook this incredible project. But I do want to acknowledge just the two incredible women I'm sitting next to. Right, I think one of the first things that we did on this project is I went and followed the Liz's. Literally, went up to Melrose Market, met with Liz Dunn, looked at what she was doing there, transforming that neighborhood, met with Starbucks, you know, said, what's your next big project? They started talking about this roastery, and we tried desperately to find space in our project. We just couldn't move enough real estate, you know, get the viaduct out of the way quick enough. So true visionaries, right? And in many ways, my job is to carry that vision from the 70s and make it real today.
Okay. Liz Muller, let me bring you in here because you're balancing the needs of a global company like Starbucks with the needs of neighborhoods like Capitol Hill or First and Pike. How do you keep that corporate brand authentic in a historic area like Capitol Hill, for example?
Thank you for the question and good morning. I think the importance of Starbucks is to make sure that when we do something, to pay attention to the neighborhood, pay attention to what happens in the city. At the Starbucks Reserve Roastery up the hill in Capitol Hill, we wanted to make a link between not only what's happened at our first store at Pike Place Market, but truly what happens within the city, how it's transforming. Just really pay attention to what's happening in Seattle. New people are coming into the city. How do they behave? What happens to them? Do they buy cars? Interesting, Tony. Good conversation this morning. Elements of being more locally relevant. How do you truly embrace the culture, what happens in that city, in that neighborhood, in that town? What Liz and Ben is doing is truly transforming and pushing the envelopes. We encourage people to not only do that on an extension of people's lounge, and why would they come to the roastery? Let's elevate. Let's truly pay attention to what happens in people's lives today. They're looking for authentic differentiation constantly. Sameness is dead. We need to pay attention to what happens in that city. What about embracing the local artists more? Seattle have that. I want to be proudly say that at the roastery, 90% is made in America, but every artist in Seattle was actually embraced with that project. And to be able to do that brings the community more together. It's about local. It's about bringing to the city what happens in that city.
Okay, all right. Liz, I'm going to go back to you, but before I do, I just want to see a show of hands in the audience here. Who here has a connection with the development community? You build stuff, okay? Just a couple people out there, okay? Good. Liz, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say maybe there's a handful of people in this development community who are saying, okay, Little Miss Chop House, what's going on? How is this going to pencil out for me? I'm thinking about this because there are some economic needs for developers in our community. There are needs from the neighborhoods. People want to live in these different neighborhoods or whatever. How do you balance those different needs there? Because they compete with each other quite a bit.
Well, I think the question is about economic feasibility to some extent. And it's a really good question. I think the kind of sort of smaller, more handcrafted projects that I do are just as rewarding financially over the long term as sort of larger, more generic projects. But that's an important distinction because it really is about the time frame that you, as a developer, intend to be involved in a project and how long you tend to hold it. I like to think that I create assets that hold their value over time and that grow in value over time, and I don't ever intend to dispose of them. And so I try to build projects that are going to be very successful 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And I try to select my tenants in the same way. But one of the things I think we need to acknowledge is sometimes those projects take a different source of capital. It takes more patient capital, a lot of times local capital, more incremental capital. But there are a ton of investors out there who are very interested in investing in those kinds of projects in their own city.
Okay, all right. Ben, I want you to think about some balance here too, because you're balancing a massive tourist economy that comes into Pike Place Market with the needs of small businesses, the growers, the farmers that help make that place run. How do you get all the stakeholders to buy in on a vision like that? Because you're dealing with a lot of different people at once.
Well, I think Liz really said it well. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of personal capital, right? It's about relationships. And we started with our project being students of history, right? Went back and looked at the original plans, looked at history of the market, looked at literally dozens of design charrettes, and then had some incredible community leadership, which is really important as well. I think Matt Hanna, Jackson Schmidt, John Finke, and Jim Savitt met with myself and Jerry Johnson every other Friday for 3 years. And those guys grilled us on every component of this project. How is this responsive to the community? How is the pro forma working out? How's the negotiation going with the city? That resulted with a unanimous approval of our project by the mayor and the city council, $34 million from them, 208 public meetings that we held. That's where the Market Front project was the primary focus of the agenda. So an incredible public process that brought us to this point.
Help me weave in that affordability piece, because we heard the mayor talking about it at the start of this program here. I think that's a very big piece of what's happening next. Help me with that part of it, because it's a very important component.
Critically important to our project, and I think it's one thing I encourage everybody in this room to think about when you're looking at your development, and I think it's what all of us have done here, is to look around the city and see what's happening, see what the needs are, and see how you can meet them and share some of the responsibility for realizing them. On the city side, that was parking, public space, and affordable housing. So we'll have 40 units of low-income housing on this site right in the heart of downtown. And it's because we were doing those things that the city was willing to make a significant contribution.
Okay, very good point there. Liz Muller, I want to ask you an economic question, keeping retail sustainable here. Do you ever build a store like the Roastery again? What do you think?
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure they'd want it, but what tell us from a Starbucks perspective.
I think that's a great question. I think I would answer it in this way. Why would we not consider what goes on around the world, not only in Seattle, and pay attention where people can come and have an intellectual, inspirational, differentiation experience and connect with people authentically? I think we live in such a high-tech technology, driverless cars, looking at the market, looking what Liz is doing. It's about people connection. It's It's about creating spaces to be able where people can connect. Within Starbucks, we thrive on that. It's about the human connection. It's about authenticity. It's about what happens there. It also is about reshaping our cities, but also about reusing. So from a viable interest is, if there's buildings that are being there, can we repurpose them? Listening to the self-driving cars, there's going to be other spaces come available. We should start thinking, how do we transform them and what happens there? In everybody's life today, there is less time for social interaction. So how do we weave that within our work, in our lives, and how we actually function? And I think we at Starbucks play a big role in that. And to answer you in a long-winded way, the answer is yes.
There you have it. I'm going to start wrapping up our discussion here with a discussion of the Pike-Pine corridor. I know you all work along it. You're all invested in it in different ways here. What is your vision for that corridor? How do we finish that connection from Pike Place Market into downtown, up to Capitol Hill? Liz, can I start with you?
Sure, and I think it's probably no accident that the three of us all do have significant investments on that corridor. I get more and more excited about the idea of this incredibly vibrant, walkable corridor that goes all the way down from the top of Capitol Hill, down Pike-Pine, through the market to the waterfront. I think having Melrose Market and the Starbucks Roastery next door to each other has created a lot of energy right at that node, which is fabulous. And I'm kind of hoping that energy also provides some impetus to take a look at that huge yawning gap that is right next to it, that everybody walking from Capitol Hill to downtown and back has to navigate. So I think lidding our different sort of misguided freeway projects from the 50s and 60s is going to play a big role in Seattle and in cities around the world. I don't think that's just a Seattle condition, but I'm particularly excited about that corridor. We've seen a ton of infill already, especially up the hill on Capitol Hill. I think, on the one hand, we could say, wow, almost all these sites are already designed, permitted, under construction. But there are still quite a few left throughout downtown in that corridor. And I would just say, I think we're raising the bar all the time. And those last sites are going to be the most important because, again, they have to provide some connective tissue for everything that's gone before them.
Yeah, the next piece of city there. I hear what you're saying. Ben, let me talk to you about that. The Pike-Pine corridor, your investment in it, finishing that connection. What does that mean? What does it look like?
It's one of the key reasons we've undertaken the project that we're building right now. And that's to ensure that the market can serve as that strong connection between a vibrant downtown and a great new waterfront. We've had lots of conversations about market to market. What does that mean? The roastery's up there. Store number 1 is in the Pike Place Market. We want people to take that journey. How do we make that corridor more walkable? And definitely what happens with the convention center, how we address I-5 going forward, right? These are critical things that we have to pay attention to, and we've got to get them right.
We're talking about that lidded park piece with I-5. I want to make sure I dive into that a little bit. Tell me about that.
I think that's what Liz is mentioning. Is that, what if we lit it over I-5? Right? We had a beautiful open space that connected, the Capitol Hill neighborhood down to downtown, down to the waterfront. I think, Liz, you even have some more extreme ideas. I think you'd go to a completely, take all the cars off. Let's take Tony's advice, right?
Yeah, right.
And make the entire thing a walking street.
All right, Liz, take us next level here. What are your thoughts for that corridor in the future?
I think we're very connected here. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Liz. I think walkability, connection with right down from the waterfront with the viaduct coming down. Great work that you're doing at the Pike Place Market, extending that. But how do people from there move up into the city? People work in the city, tourists come there. How do they actually connect up? I think what Liz has done is creating beautiful nodes of unique retail, spaces to interact between shopping and living. I think Starbucks within itself is actually wanting to connect as the city develops. Look what's happening up left and right of the city. The downtown is really reshaping. But it's not just another stamp out situation. How do we truly, in that space, at that place, connect back what happens in the community and it happens in the city? And I think it takes all of us, and I challenge all of us to not only do another project. It's about pay attention what is going to happen there for years to come, and let's build sustainable unique projects that truly transforms people's lives.
A great challenge to finish with. Folks, can we give a big round of applause to Liz Dunn, Ben Franz-Knight, and Liz Muller? Thank you once again. Thank you once again. And thanks for being here at the State of Downtown 2016.